Sometimes, a mother doesn't need proof, just a feeling. And that feeling is never wrong. Houston, early autumn. The sunlight poured softly through the kitchen window, brushing across a table set for three. Grace Moore, 67, gentle and frail-hearted, moved slowly between the stove and the counter. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a warm plate of toast down her silver hair, glowing under the morning light. She lived with her only son, Jordan Moore, 35, kind, steady, and devoted, and his wife, Mariah Collins, 32. That morning, the air in the house carried a strange stillness, like the calm before a storm that no one could see coming. Jordan zipped up his suitcase, the sound of the zipper cutting through the silence. He turned to his mother, his tone soft but firm. "Mom, don't forget to take your medicine. If anything feels off, call me right away, okay?" Grace nodded, smiling faintly. But from across the room, Mariah merely glanced up from her phone. She smiled a polite curve of the lips, but her eyes, they were hollow. Jordan didn't notice. He leaned down, kissed his mother's forehead, and whispered, "I'll only be gone 5 days." Grace reached for his hand, squeezing gently. It was a small gesture, but her heart, the same fragile heart that had carried him through every hardship, tightened with unease. When the front door finally closed behind him, the echo lingered too long. Grace stood in the entryway, looking out the window as his car disappeared down the street. The wind outside picked up swirling fallen leaves across the porch. A cool draft swept through the house, and for a moment, it felt emptier than ever. She tried to shake it off. "You're just being sentimental," she told herself. But her reflection in the glass, weary eyes, lined with worry, said otherwise. A mother's instinct is quiet, but persistent. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And that whisper had just begun. That evening, Grace prepared her medication, carefully setting out each pill beside a glass of water. Mariah passed by, perfumed strong phone in hand, typing rapidly. Grace caught a glimpse of the screen, Miami trip confirmed. Her fingers froze midair, but she said nothing. Sometimes silence isn't ignorance, it's disbelief. Mariah turned, flashing that same empty smile. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of everything while he's gone." Then she walked upstairs, humming softly, heels clicking like punctuation marks in the quiet. Grace sank into her chair, the house creaking around her. The clock ticked, steady, merciless. Outside, the sky darkened and the scent of rain drifted in. In that moment, Grace pressed a hand against her chest. Her heartbeat felt uncertain, fluttering like a bird trapped behind ribs. And deep inside, a cold truth settled in her bones. Something wasn't right. It wasn't her medicine. It wasn't her age. It was something deeper. A change in the air. A chill that didn't come from the wind, but from the fading warmth inside her own home. She looked toward the closed door of Mariah's room, and in a whisper that only the night could hear, she murmured, "A mother always knows when love in the house begins to die." The first morning without Jordan felt strangely quiet. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, stretching across the kitchen table, but the warmth didn't linger. Mariah stood by the counter, rubbing her temples. Her sigh was soft but deliberate. "Maybe I'm coming down with something," she murmured, glancing toward Grace. Grace, ever gentle, looked up from her cup of tea. "Then you should rest, dear." "I'll be fine," she said kindly. Mariah smiled, a small curve of her lips, one practiced enough to look sincere. But the moment Grace turned away, Mariah's eyes shifted to her phone. Her thumbs moved quickly, tapping out a message she'd been waiting to send. "Miami trip confirmed. He's gone. Let's go." The replies came instantly. Heart emojis, champagne glasses, and beach photos. She stared at the screen, satisfaction flickering in her eyes. That night, Mariah rehearsed her excuse. She walked next door to the neighbor's house, knocking lightly. Mr. Harold, 70 years old and kind-hearted, answered with a smile. "Mariah, everything all right?" "Oh, yes. I have an urgent business trip. Could you stop by for a few hours each day to check on Grace? I'll be back before the weekend," she said, voice gentle, almost sweet. Harold hesitated. "Is she strong enough to be alone?" Mariah nodded quickly. "She's fine. She just needs a little company. Her tone was warm, her eyes steady, a lie, polished smooth. The following morning, dawn crept quietly across the house. Grace was still asleep in her chair, glasses slipping down her nose, her hands folded around her rosary. Mariah moved through the living room, careful not to make a sound. Her suitcase rolled softly behind her, the wheels humming across the floor. By the door she paused. A quick glance back, not out of affection, but habit. Then, with a faint smirk, she whispered, "On week of freedom. The old lady's got someone else to worry about." She slipped out, closing the door with a soft click. The driveway glistened with dew as she loaded her luggage into the car. Moments later, the engine started, and the vehicle disappeared into the quiet street. In her pocket, her boarding pass waited Houston to Miami flight 482. A ticket to warmth, laughter, and escape. As the plane rose through the clouds, Houston faded beneath her, and so did every promise she'd made. Down below in that silent house, a fragile heart would soon begin to struggle, searching for help that wouldn't come. Mariah, far above the city, sipped her coffee, scrolled through photos of palm trees, and smiled, unaware that every mile she flew was a step closer to the reckoning waiting for her return. She left Houston with a suitcase full of clothes and a heart empty of care, leaving behind not just a home, but a silent plea for kindness that would never reach her phone. The third night arrived quietly cloaked in stillness. The house, once filled with the faint rhythm of footsteps and conversation, now echoed with the ticking of a clock, sharp, relentless, counting down to something unseen. As the porch light flickered outside, Harold crossed the yard as he'd done every evening since Mariah left. He carried a small thermos of tea, a habit he'd kept for decades, a gesture of kindness, simple and steady. But when he opened the door, something was wrong. Grace sat slumped in her chair, her face pale, her breath shallow and uneven. Her trembling hand reached toward the table, searching for her medication, but never finding it. Grace Harold's voice cracked, startled by the silence that answered him. He hurried to her side. "Grace, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, faint and distant. A thin gasp escaped her lips, more struggle than sound. Harold's heart pounded. He grabbed her phone from the table, scrolling through recent calls. Mariah Collins. He pressed the name, lifted it to his ear. The line rang once, twice. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. Next, he searched for Jordan Moore. The call tone echoed long and empty. Jordan was still overseas time zones apart, miles out of reach. Come on. Harold muttered, pressing the phone tighter against his ear. No response. Just the quiet hum of a call, unanswered. Grace's breath came quicker now, short-strained, desperate. Harold dropped the phone, grabbed his own, and dialed 911. Emergency dispatch. What's your location? This is Harold Bennett, 214. Brookline Drive. Please hurry. My neighbor's collapsing. She's struggling to breathe. Within minutes, red and white lights cut through the dark sirens wailing through the quiet neighborhood. The paramedics burst through the door, moving fast, checking her pulse, lifting her onto the stretcher. BP's dropping. Get her on oxygen now. Sir, are you family? I'm just a neighbor, Harold stammered. Her son's out of town. I can't reach them. They rushed her into the ambulance. Harold climbed in beside them, clutching her bag, whispering under his breath, "Hold on, Grace. Just hold on." The hospital corridors glowed sterile white under fluorescent lights. Machines beeped, nurses, hurried voices blurred into the low hum of urgency. In the ICU, doctors surrounded her bed. Among them was Dr. Bennett, a man of steady hands and tired eyes. He turned to Harold, clipboard in hand. "Sir, we need a consent signature for emergency cardiac intervention." I'm just her neighbor. I don't have any authority," Harold replied, his voice shaking. Dr. Bennett frowned. "We can stabilize her temporarily, but without authorization, we can't proceed with full treatment. If no family arrives soon, she may not survive the night." Harold looked down at Grace, frail, fading, hooked to wires and oxygen tubes. Her hand, cold and trembling, twitched slightly in his grasp. He tried again one more time. Mariah Collins. Ring, ring, voicemail. Jordan Moore. Ring, ring. No signal. His eyes filled with tears. "What kind of world leaves a woman alone like this?" he whispered. In the waiting room, the clock's hands crawled forward. Nurses moved in and out, glancing at the chart at the monitors, at the still blank line on the consent form. Outside the city carried on traffic lights, blinking people, laughing, planes passing overhead. But inside that small room, time felt fragile. Life suspended by tubes and numbers, waited on a signature that hadn't come. Dozens of calls were made that night. Neighbors, friends, distant relatives, all tried, none could help. And through it all, one phone, the one that should have answered first, remained silent. Between life and death, amid dozens of desperate calls, one number stayed unanswered. The verdict spread faster than rumor. By morning, whispers had turned into words, and words had turned into stories, retold on porches in coffee shops across office halls. "Did you hear? She went on vacation while her mother-in-law was in the ICU. Imagine champagne and beaches while the old woman nearly died." No one needed to shout. The truth did the talking. In the neighborhood, where she once smiled and waved doors, no longer opened. Curtains twitched, but no greetings followed. Mariah walked down the street, head lowered, the crunch of gravel beneath her feet, the only sound. Children paused their games. Neighbors turned away. At the grocery store, familiar faces looked past her, their silence louder than any accusation. The cashier, who once asked about her weekend, now scanned in silence, hands, stiff eyes, fixed on the register. At work, the news reached even faster. A headline circulated in whispers: "Wife neglects elderly mother-in-law, faces court judgment." Meetings were canceled. Her supervisor called her in, eyes cold polite. Given recent publicity, he said the company has decided to terminate your contract. "We can't afford a scandal." She nodded numb. No argument, no plea, just emptiness. One by one, the circles she'd built closed. Friends who once tagged her in photos now deleted her name. Group chats where her messages went unread. Even Harold, the kind neighbor who once smiled warmly, passed her at the gate with a slow shake of the head. Some things, he murmured, can't be undone. Mariah stood frozen, the weight of her choices pressing down each step, a reminder of the life she had traded for 5 days of freedom. Across town, a different story was being told. Grace, now recovering, sat in a small chair under a soft light. Her face pale but peaceful, bore the quiet strength of someone who had been to the edge and returned. A local journalist held a recorder, leaning forward gently. "Mrs. Moore, how do you feel after everything?" Grace smiled faintly, her voice soft, steady. "I'm just grateful my son made it home in time. If he hadn't..." Her words trailed off, a silence heavier than tears. The story aired on community television, and across the city, hearts stirred not from pity, but from recognition. Because everyone knew what it meant to love someone who didn't stay to survive, despite it. By evening, Mariah's face appeared on every screen, not in glamour, but as the symbol of a promise broken. She tried to avoid the stares, but truth has a way of finding the eyes it needs to meet. In the cafe, where she once laughed with friends, chairs scraped quietly as people stood, leaving her table empty. In the neighborhood where she once hosted dinners, porches stayed dark. No invitations, no smiles. Reputation, once polished with charm and appearances, now lay shattered. And in that isolation, she finally felt what she had left behind, the ache of being unseen. Not by accident, by choice. Because when she chose herself over duty, luxury over loyalty, silence over compassion, she didn't just lose a husband. She lost her place in the world that once called her neighbor, friend, wife. No one cursed her. No one needed to. The truth alone was enough to strip the mask, enough to bend her pride, enough to make her bow her head to the justice of her own reflection. No curses, no shouting, just truth. And the truth was enough to make the betrayer bow. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was punishment. A quiet so deep it pressed against the walls of her apartment, echoing every choice she had made. Mariah sat alone at the small kitchen table, a stack of envelopes before her, court orders, payment demands, overdue notices. The luxury she once flaunted had turned to debt. Her savings drained, her accounts frozen. Every receipt from her trip, now a reminder of the cost she couldn't escape. Her so-called friends, the ones who cheered beside her on the yacht, who clinked glasses and toasted to freedom, were the first to disappear. Messages left unread, calls unanswered, invitations vanished. In the world she'd built on appearances, she now walked unseen. Nights grew long. Sleep, once effortless, refused to come. She lay awake replaying everything: the courtroom graces, frail hands, Jordan's silent stare. The weight of guilt sat heavy on her chest, pressing, tightening, until even breathing felt undeserved. Anxiety crept in like a thief, robbing her of appetite, rest, and strength. Each morning the mirror reflected a stranger, eyes, dim, shoulders slumped, a shadow of the woman who once believed she could outrun consequence. Days turned into weeks. Bills piled higher. The apartment, once neatly kept, grew cold, cluttered, quiet. And finally, with nowhere else to go, Mariah did the one thing she swore she never would. She reached out. She called Jordan. The line rang, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer, that her voice no longer deserved to be heard. Then, hello? His tone was calm, measured. No anger, no warmth, just distance. Jordan, please. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. I was selfish. I wasn't thinking. I should have been there. I know that now. There was silence, the kind that strips away every excuse, every plea. I'm not asking you to take me back, she whispered. I need you to forgive me. Jordan exhaled, slow, steady. When he finally spoke, his words were soft, but sharp enough to cut through the years they'd shared. I don't hate you, Mariah, but my mother nearly died, and that's a mistake no apology can erase. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to reach through the line, to pull back the time she'd wasted, to rewrite the choices she'd made. But time, like truth, never rewinds. I hope, he continued, one day, you understand forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with what you've done. The call ended with a quiet click. No goodbye, no promise, just finality. Mariah sank to the floor, phone slipping from her hand. Around her, the apartment stood still, its emptiness a mirror to her own. She looked at the space where laughter once lived, where plans were once made, and saw nothing left. No future, no love, no self untouched by consequence. Because forgiveness, she realized, wasn't a door back in, it was the boundary that kept her outside, alone with the echo of her choices. And in that hollow quiet, she finally understood. Forgiveness isn't meant to erase. It exists so the wronged may heal, and the wrongdoer may live in the emptiness they carved themselves. Autumn returned to Houston, soft and golden, the same season that once carried fear and silence, now brought warmth and light. Grace Moore, now fully recovered, walked slowly through her garden, sunlight glinting off her silver hair, her steps steady, her heart strong. The pain, once sharp and lingering, had softened into gratitude, a quiet strength that spoke louder than sorrow ever could. Across town, banners fluttered in the breeze. A small crowd gathered outside a new building, the Grace Moore Foundation. It wasn't grand, but it was alive with purpose, with kindness, with the promise of help. Inside, shelves were stacked with medical kits, vials of medicine, and emergency radios. In the garage, gleaming under the light, 2 ambulances waited, ready to serve the elderly and the forgotten. Jordan stood at the podium, a simple speech in his hands, his voice clear but soft, carrying both memory and hope. When my mother needed help, a stranger answered. When she was alone, a neighbor stepped in. This foundation exists so that no one, no mother, no father, no soul will ever face silence when they need care. He paused, looking toward Grace, who sat in the front row beside Harold and Dr. Bennett. Her eyes shimmered with pride, hands folded gently in her lap. You taught me, he continued, that love isn't proven in words, but in presence. That those who vanish in moments of need disappear, not just from our lives, but from our futures. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the wind seemed to still listening. Grace stood, her smile tender. Her voice, though soft, carried through the air. Jordan, you've turned pain into purpose. That's the kind of healing only love can teach. Harold stepped forward, clasping Jordan's hand. Dr. Bennett nodded, eyes glinting with quiet approval. And as the ribbon fell, the crowd applauded not out of ceremony, but out of shared belief that something broken had been rebuilt into hope. Outside, the autumn wind stirred, lifting a corner of the foundation's bronze plaque. Etched into its surface were the words, "Kindness never abandons." The letters caught the sunlight, bright, unwavering, eternal. Jordan looked at his mother, her smile gentle, her heart steady, a survivor, a teacher, a testament to the power of compassion. He realized then the greatest revenge wasn't winning in court or watching someone fall. It was this peace, this life rebuilt on truth and kindness, so strong, so radiant, that betrayal could no longer touch it. As the crowd began to disperse, Grace turned to her son, squeezing his hand. "You've given me a legacy," she whispered. He shook his head, smiling softly. "No, Mom. You gave it to me first." They stood together in the fading light, a mother and son, bound not by anger, but by endurance, in the quiet victory of hearts that chose healing over hate. Because in the end, the truest justice isn't found in punishment, but in peace. The greatest revenge is to live with such grace and goodness that those who betrayed you can never reach the life you've built. Evening settled quietly over the house. The same house that once echoed with laughter now held its breath, waiting. The living room light cast a pale glow across the table, where every truth lay bare, printed receipts, flight confirmations, camera screenshots, all spread out like a silent trial. Jordan sat in the armchair, motionless, eyes steady, fingers tracing the edge of a photo, Mariah on the yacht, smiling under a golden sky. The sound of keys at the door broke the stillness. Footsteps. Perfume familiar, unwelcome. "Jordan?" Her voice carried its usual softness, but tonight it faltered. When she stepped into the room, her eyes widened, seeing him waiting, and the evidence glimmering under the light. "Where have you been?" His voice was calm. Too calm. That kind of calm that comes only after the storm. Mariah blinked, her gaze darting to the table. I think you misunderstood. I thought Mr. Harold was enough. I didn't think. He stood slow, deliberate. You didn't think when you booked the flight, when you checked into the resort, when you posed for pictures on a yacht while my mother's heart was failing. Her lips parted, searching for an excuse. I was exhausted. I needed a break. You don't understand how stressful. He cut her off with emotion, not of rage, but finality. This isn't about stress. It's about presence. And you weren't there. He reached for the remote, pressed play. On the screen, footage from the door camera, Harold arriving each morning, knocking, waiting. Mariah, nowhere. Then the receipts. Then the bank log. Then the photo, her hand holding champagne, the horizon bright behind her. Her voice trembled. "It's not what it looks like." A knock interrupted her. Harold stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I need to tell the truth." Mariah froze. He looked at Jordan, then at her. "I called you. Several times. Told you Grace was getting worse. You said not to bother you, that you were busy." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Mariah's eyes flickered, defense, shame, denial. Then nothing. No more words. No more lies big enough to hide behind. Jordan gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. Receipts, photos, silence, and set them aside. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, unshakable. "You chose a vacation, while my mother fought for her life. That isn't a misunderstanding. That's a decision." She stepped forward, tears forming. "Please, Jordan, don't throw us away over one mistake." He shook his head, eyes distant now, the warmth long gone. "Love doesn't die from arguments. It dies in absence, and you weren't there when it mattered most." He walked past her toward the hallway, toward the door that had once welcomed her in. As it closed softly behind him, the room fell silent again, except for the rustle of paper and the echo of a promise broken. The morning after the confrontation, the house was still. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just silence, the kind that follows a truth too sharp to deny. Jordan stood by the window, looking out at the fading autumn sky. The anger from last night had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder clarity. He didn't want chaos. He wanted justice. Not revenge born of rage, but one built on reason, the kind that leaves nothing undone. That afternoon, he walked into a downtown law office, Harris and Cole, a firm known for precision. The brass plaque gleamed in the sun. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Mr. Moore, a voice greeted him. Sam Harris, mid-40s, calm eyes, the kind of man who spoke less and won more. They shook hands firm and steady. In the conference room, Jordan laid everything on the table, USB drives, folders, printed screenshots. Evidence neat and undeniable. Camera footage from the house, he began sliding the first file forward. No record of her entering or leaving for 3 days. Next, bank statements, flight tickets, luxury resort transactions, then call logs. My neighbor tried multiple times. She ignored everyone. Finally, a photograph Mariah on the yacht, sunlight on her face, a glass of champagne raised high. Sam studied the evidence, expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his tone was firm. This isn't carelessness. It's gross neglect. Jordan nodded, quiet but resolved. I don't want her in prison, but I want the truth in writing, stamped, signed, and sealed. Sam opened his notebook, voice steady, as he outlined the path forward. Step 1, divorce fault-based. Step 2, civil suit elder, neglect and abandonment. Step 3, motion to freeze shared assets until judgment. Step 4, demand reimbursement for all medical expenses, every cent. He paused. You understand what this means? She'll lose everything tied to your name. Jordan's eyes met his. That's the point. She chose freedom over duty. Now she'll learn what that freedom costs. Sam slid the documents across the table. Then let's begin. Jordan took the pen. No hesitation. No shaking hand. He signed each stroke, clean, deliberate, final. As the ink dried, a quiet sense of order returned. Not triumph, not joy, but peace. The kind that comes from doing what's right, not what's loud. Sam gathered the papers, sealing them neatly in a folder marked Case Moore versus Collins. When the court speaks, it won't be anger that answers, he said. It will be law. Jordan stood buttoning his jacket. Good. Let justice speak for me. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had changed. Cars passing, people laughing, life rushing forward. But for Jordan, a chapter had quietly closed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't chase vengeance with fire. He simply signed his name and let the system carve truth where promises had failed. Because real justice doesn't need noise, it needs proof. No shouting, no threats, just a signature, and the law will speak the words his heart no longer needed to say. The courtroom was silent, heavy with anticipation. Only the shuffle of papers and the low hum of air conditioning broke the stillness. At the front, Judge Whitaker adjusted his glasses, eyes calm but unyielding. Mariah sat at the defendant's table, face pale, hands clasped tight. A single tear traced down her cheek, carefully timed, deliberate. To the untrained eye, she looked fragile. To Jordan, she looked rehearsed. Across from her, Jordan sat beside his attorney, Sam Harris. No anger, no outburst, just focus and truth. The bailiff called his case Moore versus Collins, divorce and civil neglect. Mariah's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. My client, Judge Whitaker, raised a hand. She will have her chance. Let's hear the plaintiff. Sam Harris rose, measured and composed. Your Honor, this case is not about hurt feelings. It is about abandonment, a conscious decision to leave a vulnerable woman alone, resulting in near-fatal consequences. He gestured toward Jordan, then to the screen beside them. The projector flickered to life. Footage, 3 days of silence. Only Harold's visits. No sign of Mariah. Next, bank statements, flight confirmations, Bahamas resort bills. Each document glowed under the light, undeniable. Then the photo, Mariah champagne in hand, sunlight on her face. A celebration on the same day Grace fought for her life. Gasps rippled through the room. Sam continued, voice steady. Your Honor, this is more than neglect. It is proof of intent to abandon, to deceive, and to benefit while others suffered. He turned toward the witness stand. Mr. Harold, please. The elderly neighbor took the oath, his voice trembling but clear. I checked on Grace every day. When she collapsed, I called Mariah 5 times. She told me not to bother her. Whispers spread across the courtroom. Mariah shifted in her seat, eyes darting, searching for escape. Next came Dr. Bennett, hands clasped before him. When Grace arrived at the hospital, she was critical. Without her son's signature, we could only stabilize her. If he had come a few hours later, she wouldn't have survived. The judge nodded solemnly. Then his gaze turned to Mariah. Mrs. Collins, is this your signature? He held up the credit card receipt from the Bahamas resort. The date, September 14th. The same night your mother-in-law was in ICU. Mariah opened her mouth. No words came, only silence. The judge's voice was firm. Very well. He turned back to the courtroom voice, echoing with finality. This court finds sufficient evidence of abandonment and neglect. The plaintiff, Mr. Jordan Moore, is granted a fault-based divorce. Mrs. Mariah Collins shall forfeit all rights to marital assets, inheritance, and shared accounts. Additionally, she is ordered to reimburse all medical expenses incurred during her absence. Mariah's face drained of color. Her body slumped into the chair, the weight of the words pressing down like stone. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't fight. Across the room, Jordan remained still. No smile, no satisfaction. Just the quiet strength of a man who chose truth over anger. As the gavel struck, the sound echoed like a final heartbeat, a line drawn between the past and the peace beyond it. The judge gathered his papers. Justice, he said softly, is not spoken in anger. It is written in law and etched in conscience. Mariah lowered her head, tears falling soundlessly onto the table. The courtroom emptied, footsteps fading one by one. Jordan stood alone by the exit, looking back once, not at her, but at the truth laid bare behind her. Because some verdicts aren't meant to destroy. They're meant to remind that promises once broken leave echoes the law can finally silence. The verdict was not read in anger, but carved into memory by conscience. Midnight. The city outside was quiet, resting under a blanket of rain, but in a hospital room across Houston, machines beeped softly, the fragile rhythm of a heart refusing to give up. Harold sat in the waiting room, eyes fixed on the blinking phone in his hand. He'd been calling for hours. Mariah? No answer. Jordan still overseas, still silent. He took a deep breath and tried again. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. And then a click. Hello. Jordan's voice came through, groggy, confused. Harold, it's the middle of the night here. What's wrong? Harold's voice trembled, fighting urgency and fear. Jordan, it's your mother. She's in the ICU. Her heart nearly stopped. You need to come home now. There was a pause, long, heavy, filled with disbelief. The kind of silence that only happens when the world shifts beneath your feet. Then Jordan's voice, sharp and desperate. What happened? Is she stable? They're doing everything they can, Harold said softly. But they need you to sign the consent papers. She asked for you. Sheets, rustled footsteps hit the floor. Jordan was already moving. Text me the hospital address. I'm booking the next flight. He hung up, fingers flying across his phone screen, searching for tickets, Houston earliest departure. The clock on his nightstand read 1:47 a.m. He tried calling Mariah once, twice, 5 times in a row. Each call ended the same silence voicemail. He typed a message, his hands shaking. Mom's in ICU. Answer the phone. The message sent, delivered, but never read. Minutes later, Jordan was in a cab suitcase, half-zipped jacket unbuttoned. Rain streaked down the windows, city lights blurring like tears. His heart pounded with every passing block. Please hold on, Mom. Just hold on. At the airport, time became the enemy. Every line too long, every announcement too slow. His fingers drummed against the counter as the clerk printed his boarding pass. Gate 27, sir. Departure at 3:10. He sprinted through security shoes, squeaking across polished floors. By the time he reached the gate, boarding had just begun. He found his seat, breath unsteady, chest tight. Outside, rain tapped against the window, soft but relentless. As the plane taxied down the runway, Jordan closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw her sitting by the window, humming softly, folding laundry with gentle hands. He remembered every moment he'd meant to call, every dinner he'd missed, every time she said, "Just hearing your voice is enough." He gripped the armrest and whispered, "Mom, please wait for me. I'm coming home." The engines roared. The plane lifted into the clouds. And somewhere below, in a hospital room, lit by sterile light, a heart continued to fight, anchored by love, strong enough to cross oceans. Because sometimes the line between life and death isn't a heartbeat, but a flight that lands in time. The plane touched down in Houston under a gray sky. Rain still lingered, streaking the windows, like silent reminders of the night before. Jordan didn't wait for the seatbelt sign. He grabbed his bag, pushed through the aisle, and ran. Every second felt like a heartbeat stolen. Every delay, a threat. He raced through the terminal, breath ragged, chest tight. Outside, a cab screeched to a halt. "To Houston General Hospital, ICU. Please hurry." The car sped through traffic horns, blaring lights flashing past. Jordan stared out the window, fists clenched, mind, replaying Harold's voice. Her heart nearly stopped. "They need you to sign," he whispered under his breath. "Hold on, Mom. I'm almost there." By the time he burst through the hospital doors, his hands were shaking. The air smelled of antiseptic and urgency. A nurse at the counter looked up, startled. "Jordan Moore, ICU. Grace Moore, where is she?" "Room 12. Hurry." He ran, down corridors that seemed too long, past strangers whose faces blurred. When he reached the glass doors of the ICU, alarms were already sounding. Machines flashed red. Grace lay motionless, her skin pale, her breath shallow. The monitors screamed, heart rate falling, blood pressure crashing. Dr. Bennett turned sharply as Jordan entered. "Mr. Moore, we need authorization now. Her heart's failing. Emergency surgery. It's her only chance." Jordan didn't hesitate. "Do it. Please save her." He grabbed the pen, signed where they pointed, the ink smudging under his trembling hand. Then he moved to her side, took her frail hand in his. "Mom, I'm here. You're not alone." His voice broke, the words catching in his throat. For the first time in days, her eyelids fluttered. A whisper escaped her lips, barely a breath. "Con, Veroy, ah?" A weak smile, almost invisible. Jordan nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Yes, Mom, I'm home. You're safe now." The medical team surrounded her, rolling the bed toward the operating room. The lights above flickered as they passed, bright, blinding final. Outside, Jordan stood alone in the corridor, watching as the double doors closed with a hollow thud. And then silence, only the echo of his own heartbeat. He sank into a chair, elbows on knees, hands pressed together. 4 hours, 240 minutes that stretched into eternity. He watched the clock, second by second, whispering the same words over and over. "Please, let her live, please." Nurses came and went. Harold arrived quietly, sitting beside him saying nothing, because there were no words big enough for the space between fear and faith. Finally, a sound. The door opened. Dr. Bennett stepped out, surgical mask, lowered eyes, soft. "She's stable." The surgery was successful. For a moment, Jordan couldn't speak. Relief hit him like a wave, sharp, heavy, overwhelming. He pressed a hand over his mouth, exhaling shakily. "Thank you. Thank you." When they let him in, Grace was still pale, still fragile, but alive. Her chest rose slowly, evenly. Machines hummed, steady, rhythmic. Jordan sat beside her, fingers intertwined with hers. He leaned close, whispering, "You did it, Mom. You fought." Her lips moved faintly, eyes half open, and in that faint, trembling voice, she asked, "Con? Ve Roy, ah?" He smiled through his tears. "Yes, Mom. I came back. You're not alone anymore." She sighed softly, the corners of her mouth lifting not in joy, but in peace. And in that sterile room, under the hum of machines, in the glow of dawn, breaking beyond the window, a truth settled deep in Jordan's heart. Between life and death, the strongest medicine isn't found in a vial. It's the love that arrives in time. The sun had barely risen when Jordan left the hospital. His mother was stable, resting peacefully under the soft hum of monitors. For the first time in days, he could breathe, but only barely. Something inside him wouldn't settle. Something didn't make sense. He needed clothes, documents, a phone charger. So he drove back home to the quiet house that now felt foreign. When he stepped through the door, the air felt heavy, stagnant, untouched. No lights on, no dishes moved, no trace of life except a faint layer of dust and the faint scent of perfume hers. Jordan walked to the front door, checked the security camera. 3 days of footage. Harold every morning, every evening, coming by checking in. But Mariah, not once. He fast-forwarded through each day, his chest tightening with every empty hour. No footsteps, no shadow, nothing. Harold appeared again on the footage, holding groceries, ringing the bell, waiting, sighing, then walking away. Jordan clenched his jaw, grabbed his phone, and dialed Harold's number. "Harold, it's me, Jordan. How's your mother? She's recovering. Thank you. For everything. I saw you on the camera. Every day." A pause. "Where's Mariah?" The older man hesitated. I don't know. She told me she had an urgent trip. Asked me to check in a few hours each day." Jordan froze. "An urgent trip, yes. I assumed it was work." "Work." The word echoed sharp and false. When the call ended, Jordan went straight to the computer. He opened their shared account, scrolling through recent transactions. And then he saw it. Flight to Nassau, Bahamas. Luxury resort. Ocean view suite. Fine dining. Sea Pearl restaurant. Cocktail cruise. Sunset yacht. Each receipt was a blade, cutting deeper with every click. His breathing slowed. His hands trembled. While his mother was fighting for her life, Mariah was toasting the sunset over turquoise waters. A notification buzzed. Messages from mutual friends. "Hey, is that Mariah? Looks like she's having the time of her life." Attached a photo. Mariah on a white yacht, sunglasses, reflecting the ocean, holding a glass of champagne, laughter, frozen midair. Jordan stared at the image. Not anger, not shock. Something colder, disappointment sharpened into resolve. He whispered under his breath, "While my mother nearly died, she called it a vacation." He closed his eyes, replaying every promise she'd made. "I'll take care of her. You can count on me. Family first, always." Lies, every one of them. He opened the drawer by the kitchen counter, found the pill organizer, still full untouched since the day he left. His chest tightened. She hadn't even reminded his mother to take her medication. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Every transaction, every photo, every hour of silence, they weren't just signs of neglect. They were proof. Proof that when love demanded presence, she chose absence. When duty called, she boarded a plane. And when life hung by a thread, she was nowhere to be found. Jordan stared down at the printed receipts scattered across the counter. Each one was more than ink, it was a wound. A betrayal dressed as luxury. He gathered them, stacking them neatly. There would be no shouting, no chaos. Only truth, quiet, undeniable, documented. Because sometimes the sharpest revenge isn't anger, it's evidence. And in that empty house, under the dim light of morning, Jordan made a silent vow. Every lie she told, every promise she broke, would return to her one signature at a time. Every receipt was a knife cutting through the vow she once made to care, to love, to stay.